Hello, good morning. Welcome again to Chateau Ski. Today we're going to talk about lessons that we learned after having our Lance 960 for at least 12 months. Okay, we've got a few categories to look at. The first one we're going to look at is mistakes that were made by Lance as far as we're concerned. Okay, first one is the lack of a range hood. So if you look at the space above the range, the stove, there's no range hood. Now it looks like the shape is there for it, but there's no range hood. Mistake. Another one is this silly little sign here. Let me show you. This is not a storage compartment, okay? So what is it? We made it into a storage compartment because we couldn't see why not. It's just sort of weird, you know. And here's that sign. I don't think I took a good picture of it. This is not a storage compartment, but then nobody knows what it is. Another mistake is over the little controls, the tank level controls and the water pump. There's a little hole in the wall, but it's hidden by wallpaper. So, yeah, it's like they were planning on putting some kind of control up there. Maybe they wanted to put the Truma up there, but they changed their mind. And they just covered it up with wallpaper and hoping, I guess, that we wouldn't notice. Other than that, lots of good things here. And I don't want to be all negative, but one of the things that we're going to talk about is the Truma. And the Truma is wonderful, as long as you treat it right. Okay? So let me expand. One mistake they made about the Truma is they put the temperature sensor that tells the little computer when to turn on the furnace right above the control panel, which happens to be right above the stove. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so now you're going to say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that when you cook, heat rises from the stove top, and it affects the temperature sensor. So you'll even making a cup of tea, the kettle boiling, heat rises, and it shuts off the furnace. So, yeah, it's only for a little bit, but in winter, when you're trying to keep the basement warm, well, it has an effect. So you have to be just aware of it. The simple fix would have been to put the temperature sensor on the other side of the compartment as detailed in the instruction manual. But no, they didn't do that. So I can understand why they put the temperature sensor there above, because there's only a tiny wire that has to run to the temperature sensor from the control panel. So in a way, it's a lazy way of installing it, but it doesn't work very well. Okay, the other thing with Truma is you have to be careful about is when you need to refill your tanks with propane. We've had it a couple of times where both our tanks were almost empty, so we shut everything down, took the two tanks off and filled them up, and then reconnected everything and got the Truma going again. Except it didn't like it. So it doesn't like to be interrupted completely from the gas supply. So it was giving us all kinds of errors, and that's another thing I don't like about the Truma. Well, maybe the only thing I don't like about the Truma is the error code it gives you. You get a whole bunch of different possibilities. Like you get a code and it could be like 4 different things. But it all turned out that all the codes we were getting is about the fact that it didn't like to have been taken off the gas and completely disconnected and then reconnected. One way to solve that problem is to run the stovetop, and you get rid of any sort of air that might be in the lines or whatever, and the propane is flowing good, and then after that, Truma is happy. So, but it just takes a while to get used to it. We'll talk a little bit more about cooking. One of the big things when you're cooking inside an RV, and that's all over the place, is you need to open up some ventilation. Now in here they had 2 vents but no fan in the space, because we asked for our Truma, our Lance 960 without the air conditioner. So instead of putting a vent, they just put, well, a fan. I mean, they didn't put a fan, they just put a vent. So we had that changed, and we got a vent put in with a fan, so that when we are cooking, we can ventilate the space a little better. Because not only you get the fumes, but also your smoke detector comes off. And it's the one that they gave us was very sensitive. It was the ionizing type. So we had that changed to a photoelectric smoke detector. That's also a carbon monoxide detector. So we feel it's safer. And we still have the ionizing one, but it's over in just on the other side of the wall from the galley. So it's in the sleeping quarters. Okay, I'm just going to show you here what we have for our smoke detectors. Here's the one that we got initially, and now it's over here. And now we have the one over here that we replaced the ionizing one. So this one here is, what's it? Carbon monoxide detector and a photoelectric smoke detector. Okay, one more thing about the Truma is don't assume that Lance is going to install it properly. Ours had a big drop in the hose, and it was going all the way down to the floor of the compartment where the Truma is installed, and it came back up and went to the Trumas, which created a P-trap, which the instruction manual specifically tell you not to do. Now, okay, I realized as Lance was new at installing the Truma inside their campers, so maybe they just made an honest mistake and didn't read the installation manual, or didn't notice that part about not having a P-trap, whatever. Just don't assume that they're going to do everything right, and just make sure you check. And that is a major problem with the P-trap, because what we had is we had some water ingested, some leaves, and it created an obstruction. So the furnace after a while wouldn't work anymore. Luckily for us, we were close to a dealer. They were able to look at it. They found the problem right away, fixed it, and then they attached the hose at the top of the compartment so that there's no more P-trap, and hopefully we won't have any more of that problem. Okay, here we go again. Another thing we learned is that this is a 4-season camper. It's pretty good, as long as the temperature doesn't go to extremes. Minus 40, and minus 40 is Celsius, Fahrenheit, same thing. Minus 40 is bloody cold, okay? And that's extreme camping. When you're at minus 40, things will freeze. So what do? Well, we added reflectix. We put it in the windows. Okay, you can see over there, we got the reflectix. It's just halfway down now, but all the windows, all the hatches have reflectix. We put an extra layer under the bed, and we put some in the clothes hanger, the compartment, which you call our cold room, just when you come in. And but now we're going to add some, because we found there's a couple of places that are really not well insulated, and they do freeze. Not even when it gets minus 40. Like at minus 15, we had the valves, the dumping valve for the gray tank that froze. Funny enough, the valve for the black tank was fine, but not the gray tank. By the way, on this RV, we call it the yellow tank, because it's just full of piss and vinegar. You know, I just wanted to use that expression. Okay, because we have a composting toilet, so there's no solids, there's no paper, nothing that goes in the yellow tank. It's all just liquids. So anyway, so what we had to find is we had to find a way to make freeze up the valve. So we put some boiling water over it. It took a whole kettle, but eventually we were able to dump our tanks, and then life was good. In winter, it is a problem to dump your tanks. Now, another thing that froze when it was minus 40, with the winds it was down to minus 50, is our water pump. So our truck camper was off the truck then, so it was exposed more to the weather. So maybe that's part of it. But we're going to see about adding a little more insulation behind the water pump, and also keeping the door open to under the sink, so that it keeps that place a little more warm when it's extreme weather. Extreme weather, another problem with that is that the propane stops flowing when it gets really cold. Okay? Now, when we're driving our truck, our truck burns propane. When it's minus 28 Celsius, no, can't use propane anymore. It just shuts off because it says, okay, I'm not getting enough propane, and that's it. You got to go back to burning gasoline, which is fine at cold weather. So that's not a problem. But when it gets to minus 47 or 48, somebody told me, the propane will stop flowing from your tanks. So when you're at minus 40 and you got the wind blowing, you need to do something. So what did we do? We got an electric heat tape that will wrap around the propane tank and will plug in. So we need to be in a place where you got 30 amps power, hopefully, because when it gets to extreme weather, you need to be plugged in somewhere. Very hard to be boondocking. And then that will heat up the propane tank enough so that the propane flows, the furnace works, and everything stays maybe not really hot, but at least warm enough so you won't freeze and you won't have damage. Okay, another lesson that we've learned with camping is that you can camp with your water tank full. No problem. The Truma keeps everything warm and nice and functional, and it's great. It's really good. The other thing is the furnace Truma, we keep that on while we're driving, because we found it gets too cold and it takes too long to warm it up. So we don't think there's a problem with keeping the furnace on while we're driving. If you disagree, let us know. And that's fine. We're still learning lots of stuff. What we don't keep on the propane is the fridge. And one of the things we insisted with this model is to get the three-way fridge. So it works on 12 volts while we're driving. To make sure that it's able to handle the 12 volt and keep the fridge running well, we've got an extra alternator, we got bigger gauge wires, and it works fine, no problem. We really love it. It's a great fridge. They've got a lot of good stuff on this Lance camper. These lessons learned are not all bad stuff. There's lots of good here too. Anyway, we've enjoyed camping with it. Last winter we were in Quebec. It got cold, but not as cold as this winter when it was down to minus 40 in Alberta. And so far we like it. We like it a lot. They have great parks here. They have places where you can dump, where you can get water during the winter. So that aspect is a little easier than in Quebec. But interestingly enough, the price of propane is much higher out here. Gas is cheaper. There's no provincial tax, so that's kind of nice. But you spend more money for propane. And since our truck is propane equipped, that adds a little bit to our budget. But, it's okay. We enjoy the experience. And we look forward to exploring more as we return home after this camping experience in Alberta. We'll probably go down to Idaho and Utah in the States, and then go east all the way home to close to Montreal, where we're from. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this video, and I look forward to any comments, any criticism. Positive is even better, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye. Here's a little solar light that we like to have on the back of the camper, and it's motion activated so that if anybody gets close, when we get back to the camper at night, it turns on by itself. Works great. Okay, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but if you look up top, there's the hose, the exhaust hose that's been secured to the top of this compartment. And he used to be way down there, so that's where we had the P-trap problem with our Truma. And here's the Truma. So anyway, there's a little bit about our little compartment here. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Truma exhaust. And with the Truma exhaust, you got to be careful. Sometimes when it's really cold, you get lots of ice that accumulates on the side. So you just have to keep this clear. This is the intake. So if you keep that clear, that's fine. There's the exhaust here, and the intake is on the outside.